what sounds like pseudoscience, but actually isn't. Trying to describe otoliths/otoconia causing dizziness quickly in layman's terms sounds a lot like quackery, especially when you start talking about the treatment being an all-natural set of exercises that will help you realign your inner crystals and regain balance. When an amputee is experiencing phantom limb pains, massaging their stump and then the space where the limb was actually does help reduce the pains, especially if the person is already on the maximum dosage of pain meds and can't have any more. Hearing the hands against the sheets where the limb would be tricks the brain into thinking that it's still there, so it stops the nerves from overfiring as much. The effect on your dopamine receptors from fantasizing, imagining things. I forget the exact term. As it turns out, you can achieve a pretty high dopamine response from fantasizing, imagining/talking about goals, which can provide your brain with enough happy chemicals to actually hinder your drive to go and achieve those things for real. This sounds like nonsense, but it's true. You absorb more nutrients from cooked eggs than you do from raw eggs. People don't believe it because cooking eggs actually does reduce the amount of nutrients. But cooking them changes the protein structures and makes it easier for your body to actually absorb them. It's called protein denaturation, and it increases the bioavailability of the proteins. Bioavailability describes what is actually available for your body to digest and absorb. More nutrients doesn't necessarily mean more bioavailability, and less nutrients doesn't necessarily mean less bioavailability. Duct tape occlusion therapy. Basically, you put duct tape on warts for a few weeks, and they just straight up disappear. It sounds like the modern version of an old wives' tale, but it's a lot less painful than other methods. And a roll of duct tape costs practically nothing, so there isn't really any reason not to give it a try. The pseudoscience part is that the research on it is limited. Not a lot of pharmaceutical companies are queuing up to research the medical efficacy of duct tape, but kind of promising. It boils down to 3 studies, all of which have pretty significant methodological issues. A 2002 study found that it had a high rate of efficacy, 85%, compared to 60% for cryotherapy, but it didn't have a control group and it gathered responses via phone interviews after the fact. As studies go, it's not the best design. 2 later studies failed to repeat the results of the first study, which would be pretty damning with regards to the whole scientific method thing. But they tested it using clear duct tape, which uses a different kind of adhesive, rubber, to the standard gray acrylic tape. Why you'd test an entirely different type of tape is beyond me, but there you go. This has resulted in people suggesting that it might have something to do with the specific adhesive used, as though it stimulates some kind of reaction in the skin that causes the body to attack the wart itself. Additionally, one of the other follow-up studies was criticized pretty harshly in peer review for making statements it couldn't back up. Ultimately, it's just a big gap in our knowledge, but there's at least some scientific evidence for it working. That said, anecdotally, I've found it works for me. I had a giant wart on the bottom of my foot for years, and within a few weeks of trying it out, it was gone completely. The really weird thing is that I only treated the wart on the ball of my foot and not the heel, and both of them healed up pretty much at the same rate. So there's a study that says it has a high rate of effectiveness, and I've personally found it to work, despite me thinking it sounds completely nonsensical before I tried it, but even now it feels entirely made up to me. The bacteria in your intestine exist to digest the foods you usually eat. If you stop eating those foods, the bacteria will die. So they send a message to your brain, causing you to crave those foods. If you're trying to give up French fries, for example, it will take about 4 weeks to kill all the bacteria accustomed to digesting that food, and you will continue to crave it while they live. It also may be possible to lose weight by getting a fecal transplant from a thin person. The only problem is, it is also possible to get a mental illness, potentially, from that same person, so they should be screened carefully. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. Essentially, you look at a moving light or object in the therapy room as you process painful memories, as in PTSD and related trauma disorders. It's very effective for most people and typically works faster than traditional therapeutic models. Sometimes the relief is apparent even after one session. It's broadly applied too. PTSD, anxiety disorders, phobia, dissociative disorders. EMDR is indicated for a wide variety of life challenges. Privately, I call it the little miracle. There are times when it appears to be almost mystical, but then the human mind is vast and endless, and we know very little about it. B.F. Skinner's air crib. In psychology, B.F. Skinner is considered the father of behaviorism, and he wrote a sci-fi book called Walden 2, which featured some of this. What he's less known for today, but was well known for back in his day, was his air crib for babies. It was basically a ventilated and climate-controlled box enclosed by plexiglass. It was padded but similar to a doctor's chair with paper that rolls out and is replaced with new paper. In this case, it was rolled out for hygiene, messes, etc. And parents who bought and used one for their kids loved it because their kids were content and comfortable. But the masses and media thought it was crazy. They claimed Skinner was nuts and the air crib was basically a terrarium for children. Skinner invented it because his research determined that the main reason babies become upset and cry, besides being hungry, is that they are uncomfortably too warm or too cold. His research showed that if a baby has a perfectly controlled environment and is comfortable, it won't keep waking up at night crying. And parents will get more sleep. Plus, since you didn't need blankets and sheets, nor did the baby need all sorts of clothing to wear, parents didn't have to constantly do laundry. Again, critics ridiculed the air crib, claiming that it was a horrible Skinner box, which was a totally different thing he used for experiments. They even invented stories about babies dying or growing up crazy, and that Skinner's own daughter ended up committing suicide as a result of her being raised in an air crib. Which is funny, because Skinner's daughter would later claim that she was very healthy and alive and had no horrible memories of the air crib. Ultimately, the thing that's interesting about the air crib is that it's really just a technological upgrade from the very thing most Finns put their babies in. When a woman in Finland gives birth, they are literally handed a folded-up cardboard box. And when they get home, they unfold it, put a little padding at the bottom, and that's it. No fancy, elaborate crib. A cardboard box. The Finns have one of the lowest infant mortality rates on the planet, 2.1 per thousand born. By comparison, the United States, Slovakia, United Arab Emirates, and Bosnia have nearly the exact same rate, around 5 to 5.1. You can't really buy an air crib anymore because no company is willing to associate itself with the constant criticism of the device, regardless of how successful it was to numerous couples in the 1940s and 50s, but you can build one yourself. Visualizing and mirror neurons. Research has shown that visualizing is actually incredibly powerful. It activates both motor neurons and mirror neurons. Watching someone do a squat with good form and visualizing yourself executing that same motion with good form are almost the same to your brain as physically doing it. So if you're working out, learning a dance, etc., watch videos of other people doing it. Close your eyes and visualize yourself doing it, moving through the motion. And then when you go to do it, it will be easier. Neuroplasticity is pretty amazing. Our brains rewire themselves to use new tools so we don't have to think as hard about using them. Picture writing your name and think about how your arm, hand, and fingers all move together to draw the letters. All that incredibly complex movement we don't even think about. Our brains just do it. We can use tools like they're an appendage. Some people even learn to use new appendages or senses, like the third thumb thing from a while back, or the guy who plugged an antenna into his brain that lets him sense electromagnetic fields. Transcranial magnetic stimulation for depression. I told my doctor it sounded like pseudoscience once a long time ago, but I later found out that it really is a legit thing. I haven't actually done it myself, though, and I've heard personal reviews on both ends of the spectrum. The double-slit experiment, where one particle seemingly is in two places at the same time. One of the most profound experiments in all history, and an experiment that is pretty easily done and has been repeated many, many times, because it is unbelievable. If it doesn't disturb you on some level, you are probably not understanding it. people getting PhDs to study fossilized feces, aka coprolites. First time I heard about it, I thought it was a joke. After all, isn't a fossil organic material that's been replaced by minerals, so what good will it do to study the size and shape of stone turds? Nope, it's an actual respected field of physical anthropology that's contributed a great deal of knowledge to prehistory. Not exactly what the thread is asking about, but a story that just happened. My wife and I were watching some Netflix true crime show. Some guy is on the run from the police, and the police find a bag he stashed. All the electronics were wrapped in tin foil. We laugh at it like, ha ha, tinfoil conspiracy nut. My wife asks, would that even do anything? I'm like, no. Well, I guess it might make a Faraday cage to block signals, but there's no way it does anything, does it? I grab some tinfoil, wrap my phone up, and yup, her phone calls were no longer coming through. So, that's my answer. Wrapping your electronics in tinfoil sounds like pseudoscience, but it does stop them from wireless connections. That cosmic rays, neutrinos, are responsible for a lot of random computer errors. The smaller components are, and the less electricity they need makes them more susceptible to interference. They carry very little electrical charge, but enough flip zeros to ones. The wrong flip, and oops, not working correctly, temporarily. This is why turning things off and on again fixes so many issues. Hippies will try and tell you that you need to do LSD or mushrooms to open your mind or heal yourself. But psychedelics under an experienced guide are somewhere around 66% effective at curing PTSD in veterans on the first experience. Additionally, psychedelics are amazingly effective, more than 50% at treating alcoholism, nicotine addiction, and other psychiatric disorders. Think anxiety, depression. I'm no expert, but this is based on my firsthand experience. Taking vitamin D supplements makes me feel significantly less depressed. Like, I have the potential to be normal if I've consistently taken it. And if I haven't, I will definitely be depressed, even if everything else is going great. Now, vitamins aren't exactly pseudoscience. They are, in fact, actual science. But I had a hard time taking certain people seriously about them. But damned if it doesn't make a demonstrative difference in my life. Most of psychology and neurology sound like absolute nonsense once you read into them at first. And then there's just this mountain of evidence in your face. Like, just look at ADHD. For an ADHD person, the reason they didn't do something can quite literally be, my brain didn't let me do it. And it's not nonsense. Like, it's a thing called executive dysfunction, which is the brain not knowing what or how to do something or start or a lot of other things, and then just doesn't. To the outside observer, it looks like laziness and that they're just slacking off scrolling their phone or watching stuff. But inside is an entire monologue of said person screaming at themselves to just do the thing, but they can't. It's also not just for important or menial tasks. They'll procrastinate on things they want to do, like playing a video game or reading a good book. It can often feel like locked-in syndrome, a condition where you're locked inside your own body as an observer. The perception of pain is actually modulated by your thoughts and feelings. For example, you can use willpower to make pain less, or more commonly, in real life, you can distract someone to decrease their perception of pain. I always heard the concept in action fantasy stories where a stoic monk-type character was mind over mattering the pain away and thought it was just on the same tier as chakras. For anyone who doesn't ride a motorcycle, you turn the opposite direction of where you want to go on a motorcycle. You want to go right? You press the bars to the left, and the bike leans to the right and turns in that direction. What you're doing is introducing instability to the forces that normally keep the bike upright, which are themselves not fully understood, and with enough speed and centrifugal force, the bike keeps from falling over. As you straighten the bars, the bike returns to a more stable, upright position. This happens on bicycles too, but the effect is so minimal at lower speeds as to be not as noticeable by most people. If a prepubescent girl is raised in a home with a related adult male, father, brother, uncle, grandparent, she will start puberty much later than if she is raised in a home with only an adult male she is not related to. Women who are not taking oral contraceptives can smell their mate who has an immune system more different than hers. There is speculation that some women who are on the pill meet a man, get married, and have kids may find their husband's smell less attractive when they stop taking the pill and hit menopause if their immune systems are too similar. It is recommended to go off the pill for a while to see if they find their partner's smell attractive. I might have the immune system part wrong. It might be genetic differences. It's been years since I read the studies. Ketamine therapy. It's usually put in the same category as ayahuasca or other spiritually enhancing drugs. But ketamine and other psychedelic substances actually increase neuroplasticity in your brain and allow you to kind of overwrite certain habits. It's insanely helpful in cases of anhedonia, PTSD, and addictions therapy. When paired with a session of psychotherapy, it can really make an impact. I really have hope for the future of mental illness healthcare. Earth used to be 2 planets and the moon is the corpse of the aftermath. People look at me like I'm some flat earther nut when I tell them. It's the legitimate leading scientific hypothesis about the formation of the Earth and moon. Giant impact hypothesis. Basically, it goes that proto-Earth was chilling, just hanging out getting some sun, and then Theia rolls up and starts stealing our shade, getting all up in our orbit. So we have a bit of an argy-bargy, if you will. Things escalate to a scuffle, and then in the heat of the moment, we get hot and heavy, deciding to stay together. In the process, we have a baby and call it the moon. Or something like that. I don't know, I'm not an erotic sci-fi fanfic writer. 1. An egg is a single cell. 2. A pound of feathers versus a pound of lead dropped on the moon would fall at the same rate. 3. Fluorescent light bulbs are plasma and can be used as a transmitter and/or receiver of radio and many other bandwidths. 4. Basic AI can be written in as little as 5 lines of code. 5. You can use bass speakers and aquarium air stones to achieve molecular fusion, but you will use more energy than you produce. 6. The strength of gravity varies from place to place on Earth. 7. Water will attempt to change its state before it changes its temperature. 8. Salt water can run a maze. 9. Styrofoam beads can double as an ionizing radiation detector. If they don't static cling, run. You are in danger. 10. Vitamin E removes scarring. 11. It only takes 2 people to end over half the life on Earth. WW3. 12. There is a study that proves positive or negative emotions have a profound effect on the crystallization of water. 13. Human ESP, specifically mother's intuition, has a genetic, scientific, rational basis. 14. Rain can be red. 15. Magnetic bearing. 16. Superfluidity. 17. The quantum effects for anything. Phantom pain due to physical opioid addiction. Basically, if you actually injure your back and start taking opioids, your body learns that sending pain signals gets you to take opiates. Your body becomes physically and/or mentally dependent on the opiates, and so continues sending pain signals long after the injury has healed. I was in a car accident and had to take opiates to sleep because my back would hurt after lying down for more than 4 or 5 hours. I also didn't realize the doctor my lawyer had referred me to was more or less a pill mill. So when I kept going in and saying I was still in pain, she just kept writing scripts. This is also decades ago when they were a lot more liberal with them. I tried cutting down to half as much and my back would wake up, killing me worse than it had in months. It wasn't until I did some research on my own and found out about this that I was able to get off of them. You basically just have to tough it out for a week or 2. It took 10 days, and my back was angry, but I've never had pain like I did from the accident again. I was probably on pain pills for at least a year longer than I needed to be. With all of the talk of the opioid crisis, I can't believe this isn't discussed more. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Behind the Veil.